In the darkness of the 41st millennium, where the imperium of mankind bleeds itself dry in an endless, merciless war against the encroaching void, lies the tale of one world that became a festering, suppurating wound upon the galaxy's very flesh. Its name is Vrax. An armory world of immense strategic value, Vrax was a fortress of unassailable bunkers and towering citadels, beneath which were stored billions upon billions of tons of weapons, munitions, and war machines destined for the Imperium's countless crusades. It was a symbol of order and martial might, a bastion where the Emperor's will was forged into steel and death. Yet even in the heart of such a seemingly impregnable stronghold of faith and iron discipline, beneath the gilded vaults of holy cathedrals and the watchful eyes of countless saints, the insidious poison of betrayal had already taken deep root. And the bearer of that poison was the one who would later be known across the Imperium as the arch-corrupter of Vrax, the demon known as Mamon. He was once called Deacon Mamon. Long ago, he had been but a humble servant of the ecclesiarchy upon the shrine world of Thracian Primaris, where endless streams of weary pilgrims flocked to the holy relics of the Emperor in search of salvation and divine favor. But even then, in the quiet corridors of devotion and prayer, treachery simmered silently within his soul. Chaos, that ancient and insatiable hunger, had long since wormed its way into his mind, not as crude, violent force, but as a soft, velvet whisper, patient, infinitely seductive, and impossibly clever. Mamon knew how to listen. And far more dangerously, he knew exactly how to make others listen. He entered the retinue of Cardinal Astral Zaphon of Scaris, a majestic yet vainglorious shepherd of men, whose heart was already ripe for temptation, and whose towering pride made him dangerously blind to his own growing corruption. The young deacon, sharp of mind and intimately familiar with local affairs, swiftly became the cardinal's most trusted favorite.
You're the Emperor's chosen instrument. You're the one who shall rekindle the dying flame of true faith across the stars. Those who oppose you are nothing but heretics cloaked in the false robes of the righteous.
Every word was a carefully measured drop of venom, slowly, inexorably poisoning the cardinal's ambitious soul. Under Mamon's subtle and relentless influence, Cardinal Zaphon gradually came to believe in his own divine destiny. He declared a war of faith, not upon some distant, insignificant edge of the segmentum, but here, upon the isolated and strategically vital world of Vrax, where the greatest treasures and armories of the Imperium lay stored, waiting to be claimed by the hand of a new prophet. The deacon had planned every step with cold, calculating precision. He knew Vrax was perfect, remote, self-sufficient, rich in resources, and teeming with fanatical pilgrims and loyal planetary militiamen who could be easily swayed by promises of glory and salvation. When the cardinal finally set foot upon the planet's surface, Mamon arranged everything so that the light would fall dramatically behind Zaphon, bathing him in a radiant halo, as if the Emperor himself had personally blessed the moment. The crowds fell to their knees in awe and adoration, weeping with religious ecstasy. And in the shadows, unseen by the faithful masses, the deacon quietly wove his web of corruption. He purged Zaphon's inner circle of anyone who might voice doubt or caution. He forged the disciples of Zaphon, an elite cadre of fanatics willing to die for their false prophet without hesitation or remorse. He armed the most devoted, transforming a once peaceful armory world into an impregnable fortress of heresy and open rebellion, all while maintaining the outward appearance of pious devotion. And when the time was right, he summoned the first true allies from the Warp, elite warriors of the Alpha Legion under the command of the infamous Archos the Faithless. Chaos did not arrive with thunder and fury. It came silently, patiently, with a quiet and inexorable tread like death itself, creeping through the cracks of faith long since weakened by pride and ambition. The trap was set. The fall of Vrax had begun. From that moment onward, the once holy world was doomed to become a meat grinder of unimaginable scale, a place where millions would die in the name of a false faith, and where one man's whispered ambition would give birth to one of the most infamous demons to ever walk the battlefields of the Imperium. The Loyalists declared the siege of Vrax in the year 813 of the imperial calendar. 17 long and brutal years of hell followed. 17 years in which the once proud armory world was transformed into an endless meat grinder, a vast slaughterhouse where millions of souls burned alive in the fires of betrayal and blind fanaticism, their desperate screams echoing across the poisoned landscape as faith and loyalty were consumed without mercy or respite. Deacon Mamon stood at the very center of this maelstrom of death and madness. He was no simple warrior with a bolter in hand. He was the architect, the cold, calculating mind behind the entire defense. He fortified the citadel with obsessive precision, meticulously distributed every last supply, coordinated logistics across the collapsing front lines, and constantly sowed discord and paranoia among both the defenders and the attacking forces. While the Imperial Guard, foremost among them the legendary and unrelenting death corps of Krieg, perished by the hundreds of thousands in the blood-soaked, mud-filled trenches, fighting inch by inch through barbed wire and toxic sludge, Mamon watched from the safety of the inner fortifications. With a thin, satisfied smile upon his lips, as if he alone understood the true beauty hidden within the endless carnage and suffering. The years dragged on with merciless slowness. War devoured everything: hope, sanity, and what little remained of humanity itself. The trenches filled with layer upon layer of corpses, some still clutching broken lasguns in the cold grip of rigor mortis, others reduced to unrecognizable masses of decay. The air grew thick and heavy with the choking stench of rot, cordite, burning promethium, and unburied dead. Disease and despair spread like wildfire through both sides of the conflict, turning soldiers into walking shadows of their former selves. And all the while, Mamon sank ever deeper into the abyss. He witnessed firsthand how death and suffering fed the powers of chaos. He saw with his own eyes how a world that had once symbolized imperial order and unyielding strength was slowly, inevitably transformed into a boiling cauldron of plague, corruption, and utter madness. When the Imperium finally breached the outer defensive lines after years of grueling attrition and unimaginable losses, when the death corps of Krieg and the Dark Angel Space Marines descended upon the inner citadel in a storm of righteous fury and relentless bolter fire, The deacon understood that his time as a mortal was coming to an end. He did not flee in panic or fear. He retreated according to a carefully prepared plan. Into the welcoming embrace of the tainted, the warband of Nurgle, one of the 11 Chaos Legions that had answered the call and fought upon Vrax. There in the deepest and filthiest catacombs beneath the ruined citadel, surrounded by the moans of the dying and the constant buzzing of flies, Deacon Mamon offered himself wholly to the plague god, without reservation, without hesitation. He surrendered his body, his soul, and his very name to Grandfather Nurgle, embracing the gifts of decay with open arms and a smile of true devotion. Nurgle was delighted. Oh, how the Lord of Decay rejoiced. Mamon had turned Vrax into a perfect pit of death and contagion, a magnificent offering to the grandfather of plagues. Millions of corpses lay rotting in the trenches. Oceans of pus and filth flooded the ruined streets, and the air itself was thick with spores and disease. Every breath carried the sweet promise of decay. For this grand gift, Nurgle granted him ascension. Deacon Mamon ceased to exist as a mortal man. In his place rose something far greater. He became a demon prince. His body swelled and bloated grotesquely, covered in weeping sores and heavy folds of putrescent flesh. A mighty great unclean one took residence within him, merging its essence with what remained of the deacon. No longer was this a man. This was Mamon, the arch-corrupter of Vrax. A colossal, bloated demon prince whose very flesh oozed infection, and whose every breath carried the sweet stench of plague. He was unleashed upon the battlefield like a living weapon of the plague god. He strode across the fields of war with slow, deliberate steps, leaving behind long trails of bloated flies and creeping decay. Wherever he walked, the ground itself began to rot and fester, the soil turning black and slick as if the planet itself was surrendering to the will of Nurgle. The very air around him grew heavy with the sweet, sickly stench of corruption, thick with spores that burrowed into flesh and bone. Vrax was meant to become a new plague world, wholly dedicated to Nurgle, a festering paradise where life itself would surrender to glorious entropy, where every living thing would slowly dissolve into beautiful, writhing decay, and the screams of the dying would become hymns to the grandfather. In those final, desperate years of the siege, Mamon sowed terror on a scale that defied comprehension. His mere presence was enough to corrupt the faithful. Loyal militiamen who had once fought for the emperor now fell to their knees before him, their eyes glazed with fever as they became worshippers of plague, whispering prayers to the grandfather in voices cracked by infection. He mutated Ogryns into the first plague Ogryns of their kind, hulking, rotting abominations, whose strength was matched only by their insatiable hunger for decay. He unleashed the rotting circus, hordes of the tainted, upon the imperial lines, a nightmarish tide of festering flesh and buzzing flies that swept across the battlefield like a living disease, leaving nothing but rot and despair in its wake. His voice, deep and wet like the gurgling of pus in an open wound, echoed across the devastated battlefields.
Surrender. Accept the gift. Death is only the beginning.
The Imperium paid a terrible price for their defiance. Millions were slain. Entire regiments were ground into dust and rot, their banners sinking into the mud alongside the corpses of their soldiers. The air itself seemed to scream with the agony of the dying. The once fertile fields of Vrax had become a landscape of pure horror, where the living envied the dead. Yet even a mighty demon prince could not turn the tide of war forever. In the year 830, after 17 years of unimaginable horror, Vrax finally fell. The citadel was taken by storm. Cardinal Zaffin was captured and executed for his crimes, but Mamon escaped, as did many of the tainted. He slipped back into the warp like a shadow, carrying with him the seeds of new corruption, new plagues, and the promise that one day another world would fall just as Vrax had fallen. Slowly, inevitably, and completely. Today his name is whispered in the shadowed halls of the Inquisition, spoken only in hushed tones behind sealed doors and warded chambers. The arch-corrupter of Vrax, a demon of Nurgle whose single betrayal cost the Imperium billions of litanies, oceans of blood, and the lives of countless faithful servants. He is not dead. Demons do not die so easily. Somewhere in the roiling madness of the Empyrean he waits, patient as only the servants of the plague god can be. He waits for a new Vrax. A new world ripe for corruption. A world that can be slowly, lovingly transformed into a rotting paradise for his beloved grandfather. A world where the air itself will carry the sweet perfume of decay, where every living thing will eventually surrender to the beautiful gift of entropy. For in this galaxy where hope is nothing but a cruel lie and loyalty is merely an illusion waiting to be shattered, creatures like Mamon always find a way. They thrive in the darkness between stars. They rise through death. They flourish through betrayal. They spread through the eternal, inexorable plague that never truly ends. Remember Vrax. Remember Mamon. And know this, darkness does not come with a war cry. It comes with a quiet whisper in the ear, with the smile of a trusted advisor, with the promise of greatness. And it ends with a demon prince upon a field strewn with corpses. Such is the grimdark of the Imperium. Such is the price of faith in a lie